All right, let me introduce my guest, starting with Dr. Ouma Oluga. He's the Secretary General for the Kenya Medical Practitioners, Pharmacists and Dentists Union. Thank you very much for coming. We have Dr. James Nyikal. James Nyikal is a Member of Parliament for Seme constituency and also a member of the Health Committee of Parliament. Thank you very much for coming. And we have Ambassador James Ochami. He's a former ambassador of Kenya to Gabon, based in Libreville. Thank you very much for coming. And we hope Apollo Mboya will join us shortly. He said he's on the way. Hope he'll make it. Gentlemen, thank you very much for coming. And today we are talking about corruption. The country is rattled once again. We thought 791 billion shillings was huge. And then we have allegations now of 5 billion at the parent ministry and allegation of 1.5 billion at Kenyatta National Hospital. The question we're asking today is, should corruption, in the face of what's happening, even before we delve into this conversation, should corruption be declared a national disaster? I'll start with you, Ouma Oluga, because you are in the forefront of representing the doctors. Perhaps if the money was not lost, doctors will be better paid, right?
I think, thank you, Ken. And you've started the conversation already by talking about issues pay, you know, because that is probably our focus. Although in the context, we are as concerned as every single Kenyan about the healthcare delivery in the country. Talking about corruption and whether it should be declared a national disaster, I think corruption has been a disaster in this country for quite some time now. Many years right now, because even recently we saw the president saying that, asking Kenyans what to do, and we clearly saw his anger. I think it's very unfortunate, and we as the doctors fraternity and the healthcare fraternity are equally shocked by these allegations. This is a result of an interim audit, as the cabinet secretary said. What we want to hope for is that these investigations will be completed very soon, because if indeed the Kenya shillings 5 billion has been misappropriated, and you know that we have been talking about a number of issues in the health sector, starting with management of human resources for health. Even at the ministry itself, there are a number of issues that are dealing with that. We've been talking about issues of commodities and supplies, some that are missing. Recently, I think there were also some stories in the media again about vaccines. We've also had our health workers also reporting maybe some shortages of vaccines at the facilities. We've been talking about issues of payment. Recently, we had a judgment, a very favorable judgment about our collective bargaining agreement that has been a tussle since 2013. So our hope right now, and we strongly want to hope that the investigations will be completed and that the money, if misappropriated, will be returned so that it's put into better use in the health sector. Because as it is right now, the health sector has more needs actually than is even being talked about. I just mentioned that recently we've seen health workers on the streets nearly every single day for issues of promotions, for issues of poor pay. We've also seen issues of free maternity, and especially now it's been taken to NHIF, but we've seen counties complaining sometimes that they are not receiving this money. All these things, I think there has to be a way in which we can get into the truth so that everyone gets their fair share in the health sector. The patients get their fair share, the doctors get their fair share, the nurses get their fair share. And I think it's the responsibility of the country, and particularly the government, to come out very transparent on some of these issues.
Okay.
Thank you.
My question is, does being an internal audit and the fact that it's interim and the fact that the auditees have not been queried, despite the fact that they're saying for 2 months, the auditors tried to get documents and they were unable. I know this is a familiar thing in Parliament. Trying to get documents, for example, for PAC is a huge issue. Does it make it a lesser evil, the fact that you cannot account for this money, but you're hiding the fact that it's an internal audit that is incomplete.
You know, 5 billion is not small money. And I think whether it's an internal audit, whether it's an external audit, whether it's interim, whether it's final, there are queries that have been raised.
That needs to be answered.
That needs to be answered. And we all deserve those answers. And by the way, let me say this again. There is a particular culture, and for us from the unions, we've had this severally, not just with the Ministry of Health, but nearly with all government departments. There is this belief that there needs to be some secrecy in government, that this is the way that things should work. You know, government works with taxpayers' money. And I don't think that there's anything secret in how you use taxpayers' money. There's nothing secret in involving and involving all stakeholders.
Which is a constitutional right
Exactly.
right now, the participation, public participation. Let me put this question to Dr. Nyikal. One, do you think it's time that corruption in this country is declared a national disaster? And will that create the attention it deserves? And then secondly, the fact that the ministry is hiding behind the internal audit also and incomplete work. Does that make it a lesser evil?
Look, corruption declared itself a disaster a long time ago. And it is such a menace in the country. And the fact that it should actually now be officially declared disaster comes from the president himself. When the president was wringing his hands in despair and throwing his hands in despair, asking, what should I do? When the president asks, what should I do? Who then is left to do anything? And in fact, in my mind, many people may not agree with me, when he said, should I shoot people in Uhuru Park so that people know I'm serious? In my view, that is exactly what he should do.
And there are countries that have done that.
Yeah, there are countries that have done that. In China, they have done that. Of course, you have to make a legal process. Because the impact of corruption on people is grave. Take what we are discussing now, when the facts will come out clearly. How many people may have died because of this? And whatever we do, those people are dead, they'll not come back. Corruption kills. Now, let's even get out of this and hypothetically say you are in the building industry and through corruption, a huge structure is put up with the inappropriate materials because of corruption, and the building collapses.
And it has happened.
It has happened.
Yes.
And many people died. Why are we accepting the death of the victims and not worried about who caused it? So I think we should put it, we need to actually, I've suggested it in Parliament, it is actually probably us in Parliament, and there has been an effort by a member of Keharu to try and bring capital punishment. Of course, it was not passed, members voted against it, but I think that's something we should do. So in short, yes, corruption should be declared a national disaster. It kills people. Let's say even in the agricultural industry, look at the tea industry, the sugar industry. If a whole industry is run down by people who actually corruptly receive money, corruptly run down the business, look, the children of those people cannot go to school. When they are sick, they cannot treat themselves, and now they cannot eat, and people are enjoying this. So why don't we do something drastic that people will understand? I told you in China, I think it's been done. In Korea, I think it's been done. Countries have done it. I remember one particular incident when I was in health, but this, I think, occurred in China, where was somebody, I think, senior in the pharmaceutical department of their country, actually is involved in letting drugs go into use without a proper registration. That person was executed. So, I've said this many times, we should do something more drastic, and in order to do something drastic, let's declare it a national disaster. And again, we have reached a situation in this country where it has become the norm. In fact, it is people who are trying to be honest who actually look strange.
If you're trying to be honest,
if you try to be honest, you actually look strange.
You're alone.
People ask you questions like, which country are you living in? Which means it has become the norm. I think we have reached a situation where even businesses and operations have been structured around corruption. To the extent that if you were to remove corruption, they should collapse. They would collapse, and then they should, if that's their basis. The question of internal audit. My first question is different from yours. An internal audit is a process that takes place all the time. As the vouchers are going through, as the procurement processes are going through, there are internal auditors that should be watching. The question I'm asking, why should it take so long, and why should it then come at a special internal audit? And I have worked in these positions, and what I always asked my internal audit department, I do not want to hear about corruption in my ministry through the press, because you are here as internal auditors working through this process every day. Before the process go to completion of payment, it would have passed through internal audit. So that should have picked at that time. Okay, the fact that it is not been queried.
Auditees have not responded.
Yeah, audit has not responded. I think it doesn't really make a big difference. All it can do is that now we need the facts more clearly. The people who are to query it and look at it have look at it very quickly, and now they are duty bound, whatever they find from this internal audit, to now make it public. Because now our curiosity has been aroused. So there's need to move fast, come out with the facts, let's know the people who are responsible, and let some sanction be applied.
All right, Ambassador,
yes, please.
I have a question regarding your experience. For example, you've worked in other African countries. I want your experience on that. But first, I see you agreeing with Daktari here when he says it looks as though corruption has been fashionable, such that if you are not one of them, they ask you which country, and you nodded your head. You agree with that?
Well, just before I even respond to the earlier question, my background is in accounting, and I've been an internal auditor in the private sector and also run a government parastatal. So I understand what it means by auditing, and currently I'm a practicing accountant, of course having gone into diplomacy for a short period of time. I do agree that corruption has permeated the society, and we actually, at this moment in time, if I may borrow from the medical field, is that corruption is a cancer. I don't know at which stage it is. I don't know whether it's a stage 4 or whatever it is, but at this moment in time, we need to be looking for a way to stop it. It has been a disaster since the colonial days, and if you look at the history of corruption laws, they all started before independence. Now, the internal audit, what has happened is that them being denied information, as we are told, actually it's wrong in itself, because as an internal auditor, you're supposed to access all the information from the auditees. The issue of saying that the auditees have not responded, to me, is a fallacy from an accountant's perspective, from an auditor's perspective. But let's come to your question that was directly where I was, because I was in DRC, Congo, Brazzaville, and Gabon. I can tell you, it is not a Kenyan thing. It is a worldwide thing, because even if you go to developed countries, there's corruption. But I think what we are saying is that it's the magnitude. In DRC, it was a common thing. For you to do business in DRC, you have to bribe your way to get the business. But we as diplomats, we tried as much as possible to ensure that we were in the forefront in fighting against that vice in DRC. In Congo Brazzaville, much better, the structures were in place. So what happens is that when you have loose structures, when you have people whose mind is corrupted, then certainly whatever you do, whatever structures you have, and I'm sure Mheshimiwa will tell us, we've had quite a number of laws even in this country. But my question from a professional in finance is our mind moral. We could have all the laws. Mheshimiwa Nyikal can go to parliament, pass all the laws, but then what happens to your mind? What happens to your mind? Is there collusion? And like he's rightly put it, when he was in the ministry, internal audit is part of the internal control system. Now, if there's collusion, whatever you do, then there's nothing we'll be able to achieve. So even if the president says it's a national disaster, but then we do not, in a way, change the mindset of Kenyans through various methods, teaching them from basic, from the time the child is born, that it's immoral to steal somebody, then we'll actually be putting everything on paper, but not implementing it.
Okay, I'd like to go. Okay.
Well, I just wanted to say that, currently speaking about corruption in this country isn't the easiest thing. And equally speaking about healthcare, it's also not easy because there are no positive stories in both of those two departments. When people go to hospitals, they are going there because already they are feeling pain and they are sick and they need very urgent, care and looking at what is going on within the sector and also the stories that have come out in the media, then I think what Ambassador is trying to talk about, corruption being in our mindset, becomes even more difficult for Kenyans because people get very angry and shocked when they see services that should be offered are not being offered, and then they try to link it to probably money being misappropriated. I can say for a fact right now that healthcare is very unfortunate because, as we have heard, healthcare is devolved. But healthcare is largely a shared function, of course. It's not purely a devolved function. There are a lot of shared functions in terms of policy directions coming from Ministry of Health, issues of standards and regulation. As you've seen, there are a number of parastatals still at the Ministry of Health, service deliveries down there. But at both levels of government, there seems to be some level of neglect, both for the public and also for the people who provide the services, the professionals. And I have mentioned to you that we are seeing a particular direction in terms of projects in the healthcare, whether it's at the county level or at the national level. There's a lot of concentration either in purchase of infrastructure and equipment. There's a lot of concentration on giving, like the other day we saw universal health coverage being launched in Makueni. There's these issues of free maternity. But there's particularly no concentration on what will actually deliver these services, and that is the human resources for health, the doctors, the nurses, the laboratory people. And these other projects actually consume more money than if they were put to good use. Now, I want to link this to what Mheshimiwa said about corruption being linked to business. And what we are seeing right now, and it didn't start recently, is there's a very strong link between business, private sector, and what happens in most governments and counties. And that is why you are seeing there's always this direction. The reason why no one wants to implement the collective bargaining agreement, even after a court judgment that doctors should have a 300% pay rise, is probably because there's no business that will implement it. And that is what we are talking about. And I think it's time that Kenyans woke up. It's a good thing that the media has already brought a lot of limelight to some of these issues. For us, as we mentioned, and as I mentioned, there is nothing that should be secretive in government. Policy is and I don't think that there's anyone who is incapable of probably trying to understand what should go on. Even the Mama Mboga knows exactly what they need in a hospital.
Okay.
When they have pain, when they have headache, they know very well that it is the responsibility of the government and the hospital to cure that. Yeah. And I think that is capable of knowing what someone needs. Yeah.
All right. Before we leave corruption,
we
said it has permeated the society, it has become the norm. And there's one thing we should ask ourselves. The institution that this country has put forward as to be solely responsible or to be largely responsible is the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. Now look at the history of that commission. It has never had a head who has worked persistently, consistently, and produced results, even for 2 years. No. Starting from the time of Mwau, the time of Justice Ringera, then we have Lumumba, then we have Mtemu, now we have Kinisu, we had Kinisu.
Now we don't want anyone, we don't have anyone who wants that job.
The question we ask ourselves, is it really that institution or the heads that we're removing that are a problem? Or is it possible that that institution itself is actually so also involved in corruption or permitted by corruption that anybody who comes and tries to do anything about it gets ejected? Or is the society so corrupt that it is virtually impossible to get somebody who can be clean enough to be there? And then ask the other question. How are we having a headless institution running for years? What is it doing?
That's
such a headless institution.
Hold that thought. We take a short break on AM Live for some commercials. We want to pay the bills. When we come back, we'll begin at that point. And of course, obviously, I'd like to deal with the matters of structures, morality. And I'd like to break down, for example, what this means, the 800 million that is lost. What does that mean? And is it right? And why do we devolve a function and still allocate money at the top? Those are questions that I want answered when we come back. But first, AM Live takes a short break. Remember the question of the day: should the president declare corruption a national disaster? Give us your opinion. Share it with us on our pages on social media at AM Live, hashtag AM Live at Ken Mijungu, at AM Live NTV, and at NTV. But first, let's take a look at the weather. I'd like to read a few of your feedback. Just to remind you, we are in studio with Dr. Ouma Oluga, the Secretary General of the Kenya Medical Practitioners, Pharmacists and Dentists Union. We have Dr. James Nyikal, he's a Member of Parliament for Seme and member of the Health Committee of Parliament. And we have Ambassador James Ochami, former Kenyan ambassador to Gabon, speaking about this. In the social media, Osulu Nyalik says it's sad that the highest paid steal the most from the lowest paid Kenyans. It's sad that the highest paid steal the most from the lowest paid Kenyans. And another tweet here from Aaron Wanjala says, yes, it's a national disaster. Responding to our question, should the president declare corruption a national disaster? Should the president declare corruption a national disaster? And that's the question. We're seeking your views at Ken Mijungu, at AM Live, NTV, at NTV Kenya. Let me start from where I left. Dr. Nyikal, a headless institution, the problem at the top, the problem with the people who are coming, where is the problem?
I think this is what we need to know. We really need to take a very good look at the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. Look at its system, its structures, the personnel that are there. All we do from time to time is get the heads out. I don't know whether they are coming out because they are touching on live wire somewhere, or they are coming out because the structure within is such that it is protective of those who are perhaps corrupt, or is coming out because most of the people we pick and go there are a problem. Now, my view, it can't be that all those people, at least one or two, would have actually fitted the bill. My view is that as structured now, as it relates to the whole system in the country, it is ineffective. And I think we need to look at it. Maybe we should even disband it, because if an institution is headless and monies are still paid in remuneration and overheads, what is it for? And yet, I think it is most dangerous at the times when it is headless, because then nobody takes responsibility. And it gives the officers, the officers there, freedom to do as they wish, because there's really nobody they're responding to. Then when new people come, what officers will do is probably hoodwink them. And like a friend of mine once said, boards are like mushroom. You keep them in the dark and give them manure, and they do very well. Right. So I think we need to take a good look. We need to actually re-examine the structure of EACC and look at how it relates with the other structures of justice in the country, the Directorate of Public Prosecution, the court systems, because I don't see a good link, the investigative arms. Now, if these are not put together, and sometimes you need drastic actions, and if you need drastic actions, I believe that declaring corruption a national disaster gives room for actually taking very drastic actions within the legal system, even if it means amending our laws, putting other new laws in place to take at it. The fact that it is become the norm also indicates that when people have learned, people are conditioned. If people can enjoy the proceeds of corruption, it is conditioned the others that this is probably a good thing to do. Hence the question, which country do you live in? Now, if we had drastic actions, one, you are sure you are not going to enjoy the proceeds of corruption, either because the assets will actually be confiscated as quickly as possible, or two, if you are living large, there will be lifestyle audit, or as I say, if you are caught, you lose your life. All right. Then people will start to, that will be a conditioning. I agree with the ambassador that we also need to look at how we raise our children in the families, how we bring them up, even how the churches themselves relate even to people who have been suspected or named in corruption. Can they have them in their churches raising big money while their names have actually been floated out there?
That brings me to my next question, and I want to put this to the ambassador as you respond. is there a way we can invoke the moral fabric of this nation? A lot, or some people may disagree with me, that there's no way you can talk about morality in Kenya. Virtually, all sectors have been corrupted. You can't mention a sector in this country, including church, that has not been corrupted. Because if they were not corrupted, someone argued in this show that they will not even receive money from some of those individuals. Yeah.
Ken, to be honest, like you rightly put it, we must invoke that morality. And where does it start? Like Dr. has just put it, it starts from the family. It may be difficult to start at this moment in time because, like I said, the cancer has maybe at a certain stage 3 or so. I think Dr. has confirmed it's stage 4.
Wide metastasis.
So I believe we need to think about our education system. And the education system, I'm not talking even of formal education system. I'm talking about education, informal, in church, at home, how we can be able to bring in ethics. Universities, schools must start teaching our kids what ethics is all about, what morality is all about. That if you take somebody's belonging, an asset, it's immoral. But you see, we kind of praise the people who have stolen money. For example, if today you are to pick a thief who has stolen on this side of the street and maybe an athlete who has brought gold in this country, people will be more attracted to the thief than the person who has brought pride to this country. What am I saying here? We tend to praise the thieves of this country. The reason being is they have actually taken the system into prison. What I mean here is that all across the board, and you see we are talking about the current structures that we have. We are talking about the anti-corruption. But when you talk about the professionals, and we are all professionals here, I'm a member of the EACC, they are members of Kenya Medical Association. What are those professionals doing? They are the ones who are participating. And yet we have very clear guidelines on how to discipline people within our own professionals on how we can deal with issues of crime, of professional, of unethical behavior. But we are standing watching. We are leaving it to politicians. We are leaving it to anti-corruption. Where are the professionals? Where is EACC? Where is the Architectural Association? To be able to come together. That's why I said if we leave these structures to government to deal with it, then we are losing the war.
Ambassador, you mentioned something. You said they've taken the system in prison. Yes. But don't you think they are aided by the same system?
They are aided by the same system because if, for example, and God forbid, I'm the campaign financier of Daktari, and then Daktari makes it, then by the time he's in position, it's payback time. That's what I mean.
Okay. So they are aided by the system.
They are aided by the system.
By the system. And they've taken the system into captivity because they're beholden to the system.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. You know, Ken, some of us who believe that we are young, sometimes when we listen to the stories in this country, then you have this feeling of hopelessness and this feeling that, that none of us is clean. That I can tell you that the majority of Kenyans out there are people who toil for what they earn. The majority of Kenyans out there, the majority of professionals, I can say the majority of doctors that I know, are very integral people who want to do the right thing. The majority of youth out there. But then, as has been mentioned, there's a little bit of flow of information that is already corrupted. And there's the belief that if you can't make it until you are corrupt, or you are still you steal, and I think that's already killing the professional industry in one way or another, because in academia, in medicine, for example, you know, people who work very hard are not glorified, you know. So you have teachers who always have to struggle for this pay rise because they keep staying in the village and going to school, no resources, you know. Yeah, poor pay. The same with doctors. So, you know, doctors have to go to the streets even to get their pay, you know. And then you get all of these stories in the media about money that is being allocated here, there on infrastructure. So the medical student in school today, what are we teaching them? What are we teaching them? Basically, we are trying to tell them very strongly that it is not okay to come out and be a doctor for your country and just go to work and treat cancer, that you can't make it that way. I think it's time that we, as a people, started to look very keenly into the people who are actually getting this country some bread. And they are the people who break their backs to pay taxes. Up to 46% of us, of some of our earned money go into taxes. So when these taxes are being misappropriated, when there is potholes in the road and then we still want to buy big vehicles, you know, so that we can avoid the potholes, what are we doing to ourselves? It means that we ourselves are not valuing our hard work. We are advancing the story that you cannot make it just by working hard, just by being a genuine person in this country. Yet, the majority of Kenyans actually fall in that category. And I think, Ken, it's time that we tried to listen and tried to expose the people who are trying to speak about genuineness in this country, because we've given a lot of airtime to politicians who probably have a lot of interest, so that when, for example, doctors and nurses complain, the public has been conditioned to look at them as the bad ones.
Okay.
Yeah. Instead of trying to ask, what is the responsibility of the state to, for example, pay doctors well, pay nurses well, pay teachers well, so that people can be more productive, and then we do not have these cases of everyone trying to be a entrepreneur, because you can never solve policy issues with entrepreneurship.
I have a question before Dr. interjects. There's a survey that was done by the Aga Khan University East Africa Institute, and they found that the Kenyan youth said it's okay to be corrupt so long as you don't get caught. You're talking about the youth and what you teach them, but that's the survey that showed. Majority of those polled say it's okay, you can be corrupt in this country, but the only fear being caught. So long as the fear is eliminated from the equation, everyone in this country now thinks it's okay to be corrupt.
You know, sometimes surveys is based on the question that you ask. The research question that you ask actually will determine the answer that you get. And if you asked me that question right now, I will tell you it's okay. You know, not because I believe it's okay, but because we have seen time and time again, corruption being the means of business in this country. And everyone who, for one reason or another, is involved gets to be at the top.
Okay.
Let me come into that. That survey. Okay, that's a survey. But I have something that I photographed. It was on a matatu where it was written, it is not corruption unless you are caught. Now, if you find that written boldly on a public moving vehicle, which is an advert, it indicates the morality of the society. And then there are issues, statements you hear in this country, working smart. So that actually the young people come out working smart instead of working hard. Working smart means you are actually not productive. You actually maneuver your way, and you find words like hustlers. I'm a hustler. And you look at the deeper meaning of them is you don't have to be productive. You don't have to sweat. You don't have to work hard. What does that indicate? The other element I want to bring in corruption, to a large extent, the assumption, and for a long time, the assumption has been that corruption is resident in government structure. Now, we have left out the private sector.
There's a call. You'll just begin from there. Let's take this call and then we proceed there. Okay. Hello? Okay, the call dropped. Okay.
So there has been an assumption that corruption is mainly resident in government. We have left out the other arm of corruption, which is the private sector.
Which aids. The government cannot be corrupt if the private sector is not corrupt.
You can't take if there is no giver. And I have had the experience where actually even fairly honest officers are actually induced. Let me even say trained. People say, you know, there's a way you can do this thing that is okay. There can be no way that's okay. So we have to now start looking at the private sector also very seriously in this war against corruption.
Okay.
And maybe you are going to that. Again, we have to look at it. What does it do? This is what people, as we glorify these people with big cars who give big monies in Harambes and everybody's singing, who are flying everywhere in helicopters, then we have to think, but what is it doing to the poor people that are receiving the Harambes or watching the helicopters in awe?
Yes, and we know they are owned by
And like in this case where we are talking about maternal
health.
And it is that area in this country that has actually the worst index of health performance. The others have to some extent improved, but maternal mortality has remained the worst.
Daktari, I'd like us to break that down, what this means, especially the loss of this money. And I'll start with the ambassador, but I hear our caller is back online. Hello, Joseph?
Hello, good morning.
Good morning to you.
Yeah, I want to contribute to the debate. I want to support Dr. Ouma when he says that a majority of Kenyans are not corrupt. Only a few people are corrupt. And I also want to say that what we have lacked in Kenya are examples of people who have been punished on corruption. We've never seen anybody who is a big fish being in jail, going to jail because of corruption. So that's really what has messed up the whole country, because we never see anybody big scandals, but we never see anybody in jail. We just need to set a few examples, and the whole thing is going to fall in place. This is very similar to what you see on our roads. People who are overlapping are very few, but the few who are overlapping on the roads are the ones who are making the whole mess on the roads. So I think corruption is not as endemic as we want to think. I think it's just a few people, but a few bad potatoes in a sack, who need to be put in jail, and we move on. And that country falls in place. I don't think it's as bad as just a few bad people who steal too much, and nothing happens to them. So what we need to do is we need to see action on those people who are messing up the country. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I think that's
Let
the
me
point
respond
we
to
have
another
here.
element.
Yeah.
I think I agree with him. Examples. Mine was extreme, and I still believe you need it extreme. But we also should not think that the big corruption is the only corruption. If you work in systems, like in government systems, where there are procurement systems, where there are voucher systems, even the people who are taking maybe 500 shillings for lunch before they move a voucher, if you think of the large numbers in the government system, it is like ants. When you see a small ant, you don't think it can bring a whole house down. But if there are ants all over the house will come down, because that also clogs system. The big ones take big chunks, but the small ones clog systems so that systems don't move. If you're talking of procurement, say of drugs, and these people are taking small bribes, delaying things, you run out, the systems don't work, the people who are trying to start business can't do it. Okay. It also clogs the system. So we have to look at it. Corruption is corruption, from the small ones to the senior ones. Punishment, I agree with him, is necessary.
I want to go to Ambassador, but Ambassador, I'm told once again, I think we'll talk the last call. Alex is online. Alex from Isiolo,
yes,
good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning, talk to us.
Yes, I'm very happy with seeing Daktari. I know him for a long time. I've met him in hospital, Dr. Nyikal. Anyhow, I am calling from Isiolo.
Yes.
But then now, there are two things about corruption, and I would like us to address this issue a little bit more seriously than we have been doing. Because you see, it's like everybody is talking corruption, and not first of all, can we first of all get a first line of investigation, serious investigation, getting into what has happened. Like for instance, now it has been splashed in newspapers. I'm not even seeing them. I'm very far. We don't get newspapers very early in the morning. But then all the same, why can't we first of all get people getting investigated and thoroughly? Because now when you splash this, you get people starting hiding things all over and running away. If we can secretly get investigative agencies, first of all, investigate and throw these guys to cells, and then we can blow up these matters in the newspapers. That one, I think we'll be fighting corruption in a different scenario. But then every other day, you find people find a story being blown in newspapers, and these guys are starting running, because now it is true. Let us be very honest. We have even seen, even from wherever we are, even in counties, that people are getting very rich very fast. And some people are working in Nairobi, they come here, they start making big buildings, tall buildings all over. And these people are civil servants, even we know their salaries. Why can't you, first of all, and you see we have EACC everywhere, we have CID everywhere. Look at it this way. We have also abdicated duty. There is this line that the DCI, the Director of Criminal Investigation, has a direct, he can charge anybody. Don't be cheated that it has to go through the EACC. That law has not changed. The Director of Criminal Investigations can take somebody, can pick somebody and take him straight to court without going through even what do you call this, the office of Keriako Tomiko.
Okay.
So these are issues where now, if this is done, we will not even have the musical chairs playing what we saw the other day in
Thank you.
The second phase.
Okay, very fast, Alex. Really fast.
This is now a question. Do you think it's right for the media to, first of all, to blow up cases before the matters have been investigated, so that now we can have people will come. In fact, by the way, if somebody comes around and says, I was already prosecuted by the media, what in the minds of everybody in the world, you find this fellow has been prosecuted and judged and condemned.
Okay.
And had. But if secretly these things can be done, and then
Thank you.
blow them when these guys are going to court, so I think that one will work better than. And then we stop all the hula-baloo of talk shows.
Thank you, Alex. Alex, your point is made. Alex's point is made. I think he's just basically coming up with the ideas. The first line of investigation should be the EACC. I think it should be. And the question on the media, if we don't blow up these things, they'll be concealed, they'll be hidden. This internal audit is there's one for Kenyatta for 2014, 2015. It's not been reported about. No one knows about it. No one knows about the irregularities. If we don't speak about this in the media, no one will care. The 2015, 2016, no one knows about it. This is an internal audit. If we don't speak about them, no one will talk about them.
And even probably you in the media are also overwhelmed. I can tell you, this is for me the sadness, is that even today, you've brought us here to talk about health sector and probably the things that are going on. In 2 weeks, or even tomorrow, you'll be talking about something different. So even the media, you're overwhelmed because then
there's so many things.
There's too much noise, I call too much. So then we do not get a lot of focus. I wanted to say that, in my own opinion, even the existence of the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, in my own opinion, is a failure of the judicial system or a lack of trust in the judicial system. Because the Constitution is the same Constitution. Chapter 6 is still Chapter 6. The laws of this country are still the laws of this country, whether it's laws of public procurement or whatever kind of laws. The police is still the police. So usually, sometimes you may feel like the EACC is actually just a way to make it even more complex and more bureaucratic in terms of investigation.
Me, you're not the only one who thinks like that. A lot of them. But let's focus this. I know you will mention that. Let me go to Ambassador here. How much, if you look at it quantitatively, how much of this is a loss to the country? And I begin by asking, when is the last time you went to a public hospital, for example? Do you go to public hospitals? Do you go to a level 4, level 5 hospital as ambassador?
No, I don't, because you will not get the services that you're supposed to get. But
the doctor here will tell you that the same doctor you will get at the private hospital is the same one you will get at the public hospital.
Exactly, because already if you're asking for Panadol from the level 4, you will not get it because the procurement system itself.
So it's about the things that are not there that you'll find in the private. Okay.
Yeah. How much has been lost? And going by the chief of staff, the head of public services, said a third of our budget is stolen.
By how many people?
By few people, but affecting
millions.
41, 42 plus million. And I want to go back to what the gentleman said on when he called in. There are few people. But these few people are causing misery to the 42 million people. So what do we do with these few people? We must ensure that we are able to put them in a place so that the many people can enjoy the social and economic services that the government has promised. So we are talking about, if we have a budget of 2 trillion, we are actually talking about a third of that. So you can imagine. So like Dr. has just said, today it's health. I can tell you tomorrow it will be another ministry. The next day it will be another ministry. And what happens is that because of the lack of trust in the structures, now people end up giving the information to the media so that they can blow up.
Yes.
And now you hear, oh, Kenya National Audit Office is in the Ministry of Health. Tomorrow, you blow up something else, there'll be another ministry. There'll be another ministry. So you find they will be doing investigation that is not focused. And my prayer is that, like we said earlier, it's a national disaster. We need to come back and decide where are we moving with this corruption thing.
You worked in the ministry.
Yes.
Tell us quantitatively, how much does this affect the common mwananchi? I'm looking at maternal, that's my concern primarily. I'm looking at maternal health, and a lot of money has been lost. And while you comment on that, talk to us about the fact that health has been devolved, but there are shared functions, as Dr. Oluga said. But the shared functions are policy, you know? Why would we still allocate funds at the top, and yet they have been involved? Because to me, that's where corruption begins, by devolving. So the county government of Nairobi, you are in a tussle with them, is paying
we still are in a tussle with them.
are paying their own doctors, right? And then suddenly you allocate money right at the top.
Okay. This has tremendous effect, and you should look at it that if there is loss of money, even if it is in health, even if it is in water, even if it is roads, it has tremendous effect on the people. And if we take health, for example, we do not know when this is queried and the people in charge now say, okay, this is the level of loss that was exaggerated. Some loss will definitely be there. And if you look at the service to people, we look at maternal health. I worked in the ministry between the year 2003 and 2007. And we had very high maternal mortality, high infant mortality, high under 5 mortality, low use of contraceptives. These are the indices. And I think we made some improvement as a country. And by 2008, there was a significant drop in child mortality, infant mortality, under 5 mortality. If there was a little improvement, even in contraceptive use, but the use of maternity services did not improve much. And the maternal mortality did not improve. And the reason it did not improve, maternal mortality tests the whole system, right from when the mother gets into labor, let's say, or gets an obstetric complication like bleeding, to the time she reports in the hospital, to the time she gets into, if it is theater, into theater. So if all these systems are not taken care of, then of course these mothers will die. So this will definitely, if it's true, affect us much more seriously. The effort was make it free so more mothers come. But there have been surveys that have actually been done, have indicated that one of the problems that are bringing a challenge to the whole program is, one, we do not have enough human resource. And Dr. Oluga will tell you that. Two, the staff have low morale because of the pay system and the delays in system. Three, even the money itself is not reaching the facilities on the ground in time, and is not enough. Now, in that scenario, if you then have losses, it goes across. The staff will not be paid in time. The drugs will not be bought in time. The equipment will not be available in time. And so people will die. And I'm worried about maternal care, because it is by its very nature an emergency. If a mother goes in labor now and you diagnose a problem and you cannot move her from where she is, even in the village, to hospital, and then even within hospital to the treatment that's required, say it is surgery, within actually 1 hour, you're going to lose that mother plus the baby. So that's a very sensitive area we cannot afford. And so if we then devise a system where we want it to be free, and that money that is to make the mothers get free services does not reach the facilities, then of course the effects are disastrous.
Okay.
And people die.
Right.
And I think at this point it's worth mentioning, going into healthcare discussion deeply, and I don't know what Dr. will say, but we right now do not have a model healthcare system. We have never modeled our healthcare system. So if you ask me, what are the fundamental goals that we have in our healthcare system? There's none. There's no focus. So we have all of these things called strategic plans, policies, and all of these bills. But as a country, we do not have any focus. And my first suggestion is that we must, first of all, model our healthcare system. Whether we want to model it around devolution, whether we want to model it around cost, whether we want to model it around regulation, we must, first of all, model. Like the UK, they have the NHS, for example. In places like Canada, they have very functioning public systems. I want to mention that the cost of all of this, there's a time we participated in some surveys on the cost of corruption in healthcare. I think it was done by the Society for International Development and also Kellin. And even at that particular time, even at the levels of the hospitals, there were a lot of glaring variations in terms of cost of procuring drugs, for example, in Mombasa versus Kisumu. And these things, on the surface value, it just looks like the money that is meant for healthcare is being lost. But deeper, you look at all the healthcare indicators. Maternal mortality is one of the indicators. Infant mortality is one of the indicators. Doctor-patient ratio is one of the indicators. Life expectancy is one of the indicators of a healthcare system. So if you, and of course in Kenya we have concentrated on maternal mortality. But you see, maternal mortality does not reduce itself. If you don't have a doctor-patient population ratio that is adequate, you're not going to reduce that maternal mortality. You're not going to reduce that infant mortality. You're not going to increase life expectancy. Then now you start looking at it from the cost of families losing lives, for example, the income to those families. You start looking at it as the cost of insurance. When you start to procure drugs at a higher percentage, and you know, at higher prices, the government, if government is buying at this particular price, private sector will not do any better. So insurance will be much more costly. That means that for the same amount of money you're paying for your insurance, you're actually getting lesser care because of drugs that probably are procured higher at the public hospital. So this thing is a chain. It's a value chain. And the public must understand very well, and especially the working population of this nation must understand very well. You give 30% of your money in terms of tax, payee. Then you give another 16% when you're buying goods in terms of VAT. Then you still want to, the one that you're left with, you still want to go and purchase insurance. You've left your money. Doctors are not paid, so they are leaving public sector. Drugs are not procured, so public sector is bad. You want to even purchase higher insurance. When that insurance does not work, you still want to raise Arambes and pay money to go to India, where we are losing about 10 billion Kenya shillings. So the cost, and then you're looking at counties, for example, my county, where life expectancy is in the 40s, 42, for example. So if you're looking at what is the cost to these orphans that have been left because their father died because they couldn't get care, and then you trace that to employment of nurses, to employment of doctors, to how you pay them, to those things we talk about called collective bargaining agreements, this 300% pay rise that we are talking about. So it's all interconnected, and it is all about modeling a healthcare system that, number one, responds to the needs of the patients, and number two, responds to the needs of the people who provide those services, who are the healthcare professionals. And I think that is the discussion that we've never been able to have. So we have this pouring new wine in old skin. So you have a free maternity program there.
And
you have managed equipment there. Then you have this other thing going on there. Then you have counties talking about their stuff, about waste management. No one is talking about a healthcare delivery system.
I hear you.
That is going to respond to Kenyans.
I hear you. Let's take the last call. He called and the call dropped. Major retired Peter, good morning.
Hello, Mr. Mijungu, how are you?
Good morning to you.
Can you say hi to the panelists?
Yes, they are here. They've had you.
Hi.
Yes, the answer to your question is the declaration of corruption as a national disaster should have been done long time ago. In fact, it is overdue. Now, the solution to this, the problem is the executive. The executive, the parliament, all of us, Mijungu, and I think the solution should be, think of these issues. Demonstration. You remember, Mijungu, there's a time we had a mob justice. I'm not proclaiming the mob justice, but I think we should revert to that one, where mob justice should be thought of to be legalized. It can be human way, and I think it can work. Another issue is to disband the structural agencies which oversight corruption and put others. We have our university students who are able to do these things, and this should be put in education system, the corruption subject as it is. And we should have a think tank where people with a lot of knowledge on these issues, professionals, to sort out the issues of corruption. Our political leaders should take up a role to talk about corruption. And I think, like we have seen in Saudi Arabia, somebody was executed. People should be killed here. And we should have a national referendum. Let us ask our people, what do they want to do with this disaster, which is killing our country?
All right.
And then we should have special jails for corrupt convicts, and courts, special courts, and special jails where
We already have that, right?
corrupt victims
Corruption courts.
can be sorted out very, very quickly so that we don't have a problem. And as it looks now, this is a national disaster.
Thank you, Peter
Until
Muthi.
these big fishes who steal a lot of money should be put in jail. I'm telling you, Mijungu, we shall be heading for the right direction. Otherwise, thank you so much, Mijungu, and I'm requesting you also to call me back again.
All right.
When this topic arises.
Thank you very much. We had Major retired Muthi last week. He's a veteran. He's over 60 years old. He's retired from the army. So he was here during the veteran show last week on Thursday. And I like, before I give you an opportunity, the system. There's a tweet here that says that if we decided to hang corrupt people in Kenya, there would be no people. Everyone, seems like everyone in Kenya is corrupt. And I saw one earlier. Someone proposed that if the institutions can't do nothing, the police, DCI, DPP, if they can't do nothing, what we do is give the authority to universities, so that if Dr. Nyikal, a revered doctor, is corrupt and you're found to be corrupt and there's nothing the system can do to you, we go back to your institution and we ask them to withdraw your certificate.
But those regulatory authorities...
Can I give a simple illustration?
Let me give it to Dr. Nyikal. Yeah.
Regulatory authorities are in existence. The Medical Practitioner and Dentist Board for doctors. There is the Engineers Institute for Engineers. There is the
Architect.
There is the architect. There, all these things are there. But remember, they're in a system. If they're all in a system that asking, in which country are you living? A system that believes in working smart, a system that a system that glorifies hustlers, a system that glorifies the corrupt, then the temptation is for them to go that way. I still believe that drastic action will shake us up.
Drastic action
will shake us up. I was talking about human beings learn by conditioning. When a child touches fire once, they never touch it again. Yeah. So we need, as a nation, people should start touching fire when they deal with corruption, so that they do. But let me go into the health system. Health is a system. You know, the health system, you start with the human resource. That's Oluga's pet, because the human resource. Then you talk of infrastructure and equipment. Then you talk of products. That is the drugs and the non-pharmaceuticals that is there. Then you talk of the management of the system. Then you talk of the financial system of the system. Then you talk at the information and reporting, all these are systems. I agree with him that whenever we start to actually put a system in place, then normally we have a major change, and when the changes occur, we don't sit down and say, this is a very complicated system. When you want to change it from one to the other, we have to really sit down at technical level, not political level. The political level makes a decision. We want to split the ministry into two. Once you have done that, you then leave it to the technical people and say, where do we split it? What goes where? How was it working before? How was it relating to...
Has it ever worked before?
No.
In my mind, I think, maybe not really, I don't want to blow my own trumpet, but between 2003 and 2008, we actually did make, and what really vindicates that, if you look at the KDHS, the Kenya Demographic Health Survey, between 2003 and 2008, you see a remarkable change, except for maternal health.
Yeah,
and I said, and Dr. Oluga was saying, maternal. Let me tell you why maternal health is important. It tests the whole system from public health, where the mother is looked at when she's well but pregnant, to the transport system, which takes her when, it even includes the road, when she's made a decision to go to hospital. And when a decision is made, she needs to be transferred. The transfer system, and when she gets into hospital, is the theater working? That theater will work. If it is working for a mother, it will work for somebody with a fracture. It will work with somebody who has got a chest injury that needs surgery. So it tests the system.
whole system. Okay.
Now, then we come to when I think by 2006-07, we actually were making a change. There was a strategic plan which we were calling reversing the trend. I'm sure you've seen it. We put a lot of things in place. Even the referral system was in place. The reproductive health standards were in place. The most successful ones were the introduction of ARVs, the reduction of malaria through the net system, the change of drugs to Coartem, the indoor residual spraying. That this worked. Then when we came to devolution, I convinced that health will work in devolution and can work. The only thing we did not do is we did not implement what we put in place in Schedule 6 of our Constitution. The process of how to devolve,
health,
which brought in everything, which brought in the transition authority. We were to actually look at unpack the functions, cost them, and look at the structures. The Constitution even gave us Intergovernmental Relations Act and Intergovernmental Relations Secretariat, where the national government and the county government should sit and say, if we are buying vaccines this way, and now we are in a devolved system, now, how do we now do it? You just don't take it and throw it to the county. Vaccines didn't work. Now, the health system, if you had the health system and the human resource, in the human resource, doctors alone are of 3 types with different schemes of service. Nurses, different. Physiotherapists, different. You can't just pick it and say, now you belong to the county. You have to say, okay, if you are an intern, you have been training, where are you? If you move from that and you now go to the county, what is the smooth transition system? That is what we have not done properly. Okay. And because of that, the system is suffering. And if you have policies and standards which are national, and then the implementation is at county, you must have a way of interacting so that somebody can ensure that the policies and the standards are adhered to. But what we are now doing, we are taking Article 6.2 of the Constitution, of that the 2 levels of government are independent. Yes. But they say independent, but and must work in cooperation. Yeah. It is that cooperation, and I dare say there's a lot of ego issues there. In matters of health, you must put ego aside and put the people's health at the front.
Let's talk to the ambassador.
Yeah, I think as we talk about corruption, and I like what Major said, unfortunately, I don't prescribe to mob justice, but I think we need to look at our structures in place. We have them. Things have evolved. Our systems, our strategies, we need to revamp them, but we have ended up being more talking than actioning on these things. One of the things that I think about we already have the anti-corruption codes. How effective are they? Who has done an evaluation of the effectiveness of some of these corrupt codes, anti-corruption codes? The other thing is, how about the investigators? Who are they? Who evaluates their performance? How did they join the system? For example, today, we hear how policemen join the system. If you join a system through bribery, would you stop that kind of thing in your lifetime?
Mm-hmm. Good question.
If, for example, I applied a job in government today and I had to use somebody in power, I go to Mheshimiwa, please help me, I'm looking for this job, would I stop corruption? So it's all about, and I go back to the deception of our minds. We have decepted our minds, and corruption is very much linked to power and politics, because people are in politics because of power, and they want to use that system so that they can be able to continue corrupting the system. So, whereas we are talking, for me, I think it is a high time, and I do agree, we should even scrap off the anti-corruption, relook at the whole system of anti-corruption, look at the laws, the regulations around it, and let's have the way we talk about famine today, we should be talking about corruption. For me, corruption is worse than famine as we are speaking at this moment in time.
And you're not the only one, Ambassador, who thinks, he thinks anti-corruption should be, that institution should not be there. I know you think the same. I have had people who think the same. They think, let's resort to what we used to do. Empower the police, you know, let them investigate, empower the DCI, and then take people to court, create an anti-corruption, a special anti-corruption or corruption division in court, and do away with that institution, because it is the stumbling block. It is the stumbling. Someone, Jacoyo Midiwa, actually argued in this show and said, if we have that institution and we have the people in the secretariat, we will never fight corruption in this country. But we have about 8 minutes left. I want us to talk about the way forward. And at what point in your views, and I'll start with you, Dr. Oluga, at what point do you think Kenyans will say enough is enough? We are tired. Because if we steal your medical supplies, because that's what happens, it's medical supplies stolen. If we stop the doctors from going to hospitals because we can't pay them and they're out in the street. If people go to hospitals and share beds, for example, and then you're still comfortable in your skin as a citizen of this country. I mean, what is the worst? Because I know key things that are important in this world. Health comes number one. If you're not healthy, nothing can happen for you. So talk to us about that as we wind up the show.
The way forward, and I personally like to talk about the way forward than the problems. Although I have to mention that we also have to train ourselves as a country to listen to way forwards than to listen to problems. Because sometimes you don't just have to talk about problems, you have to give solutions. Now, Kenyans, at what point will Kenyans say enough is enough? Kenyans have given up. Unfortunately, they have. And they have given up because of two reasons. One, because they have not been given direction on what they can do. And Kenyans are waiting for that leader who will ignite them. People are frustrated. They are waiting for that leader who will inspire them, who will show them.
Don't forget 2003, President Kibaki did that.
I do understand, but that was really short-lived. Kenyans are waiting for that aha moment where they will be rallied towards, this is what you as the citizen can do. Of course, the citizens must never forget that they are the most powerful. In the Constitution, the sovereign power is vested with the people. And that sovereign power is not just in the Constitution, it is in your vote. That's the first thing that people must know, and even the youth must know that. Secondly, the citizens have given up because of the power index. So the population is too poor and too dependent on the political leaders. to an extent that they cannot question them. The business people are too dependent on the government for business that they cannot question them. The professionals in this country, the doctors, we keep making noise, we keep talking about issues. The teachers keep talking about issues. The nurses keep talking about issues. The academia keeps talking about issues. It's a little bit ignored. So the citizens feel a little bit disempowered because of those two reasons. The power index that exists, and because there is no leader in this country that has shown them direction. And I think at this particular point, I would want to say, the president asked us, what should I do? I think the president has a lot of power, and not just power to prosecute people or to ignite the system. First and foremost, the president has power to inspire the country. And I think, to me, that is the most important thing the president should do, to inspire the country, because we have seen his anger, we've seen his frustration. We agree with him in terms of this is a menace. We don't want to do this. So in my final remarks, I'll talk about issues health. And you talked about the cost. So first of all, we're talking about these monies that we are alleging to have been misappropriated. And first of all, we have to remember that the budget in healthcare is still less than what we anticipate it to be. Yeah? So even what we are allocating is far much less.
I'll stop you there. How can it be far much less, but people get an opportunity to still steal it?
Let me tell you why people get opportunities to far much steal it.
Steal that little.
Number one, it's because he said when you go to hospitals, you don't find drugs. Number two, we have seen stories of probably vaccines are lacking and things like that. People make bureaucratic challenges that make it difficult. Right now, I just mentioned to you doctors and their CBA that the court has ruled that we should get our 300% pay rise. Okay, and it's not happening. That will cost us roughly 8 billion Kenya shillings. Okay. You see, that's already money that we are saying is probably alleged to be misappropriated. There are people who are being paid. At the Ministry of Health itself, I can tell you there are a lot of frustrations. If today a doctor or a nurse who is working there and has never been promoted for 15, 20 years, they have been looking for this promotion. This promotion is probably just worth 10,000 shillings or 15,000 shillings in their salary. What do you think they're feeling today, this morning?
You need to conclude.
When you look at issues of allowances not being paid to people, when you look at mothers who are going to hospital and probably the ambulance does not have fuel, that is where the money is being lost.
Conclude. I need to give this gentleman
So in conclusion, I want to mention this. As a country, we have been very superficial. Number one, on issues of health, and number two, on issues of corruption. And I think it's time that we get more inspired. I would want to believe that the president is the best position to inspire us and to end impunity. Because if people are going and they're giving even the president wrong speeches to call people who are not doctors, then you see that's already impunity, that's already corruption.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let me move to Nyikal. We have very few minutes to
I think we must have commitment at the highest level, political and executive level, to fight corruption. And as I say, if not they are declaring a disaster, we must have some legal way of making it an urgent thing to be dealt with. Okay. Follow that with looking at the structures we have in place, plus the legal systems we have in place. Live by example. If you are at that level, if the president level, there should be zero tolerance, and people should see it by people around you. Okay. Then make sure that those who are involved and found to be corrupt actually suffer visible sanctions, like being sent to jail, their property being taken, or, as I keep saying, being executed. Okay. Then follow with look at our national morality. Look even in churches, in schools, in families, so that we now say, this is something you don't do in this country. We cannot eliminate it. The word has existed from time immemorial, but we can actually bring it down to a level where people can actually survive and make use of services brought about by public resources.
Thank you, Dr. Nyikal. Ambassador.
Just to emphasize, the president must take the lead. The president, after talking, he must act. When I talk of acting, I mean he must start putting structures in place. He must ensure that the executive takes seriously what he has said, and he must have a feedback on a short periodical basis, not talk and then wait until next year then talk about corruption. For example, it should not be alone. The CJ must take the judiciary heads on to fight corruption as a support to the president. The politicians must, in their barazas, talk about it, not talk about how you should vote me back, but talk about how we can eliminate corruption in this country and what mechanism they have put in place. Because it's embarrassing when you hear a politician whom we look up to is involved in a CDF kind of corrupt activity. That in itself demoralizes people. Private sector must be consistent, not to go once in a while to State House and then they give their nice grandiose speech and then they go back, because like we have said, it is not just public service, it's private sector. So private sector must also take the lead. Then strong independent checks must be there. The people who are investigating must be independent enough to carry out investigation and not to be denied any information at any given time. Lastly, lifestyle audits. We have talked about lifestyle audits, but I think it's just on paper. We must put in place mechanism so that if I join the government and then thereafter, like somebody from Isiolo said, I'm putting up a mansionette in Isiolo against nothing around, people should ask, where did you get this kind of money? And then special prisons
should be created.
We have special costs by now, so that when you come out of that prison, it's on your head that one time
you are in
this particular prison.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ambassador, for speaking to us, Dr. James Nyikal and Dr. Ouma Oluga for speaking to us. And of course, to summarize, we've had a lot of suggestions. And top of my mind, universities to be empowered to withdraw certificates, executions, withhold taxes, and do away with EACC. All these are suggestions, but ultimately, the buck stops where it stops. Thank you very much for watching AM Live. My name is